The laughter echoed through the pristine, white-walled operatory, sharp and mocking. 3 men, all in their late 20s, blocked the only exit. One leaned casually against the counter, his grin dripping with arrogance. Another tapped a dental tool on the tray, like it was some kind of toy. The third, the loudest, leaned in close to Dr. Madison Cole, his hand accidentally brushing her hip as he made a crude joke about checking her cavities. The word stung, but the touch lit a fire. Patients in the waiting area looked up, some whispering, some pretending not to notice. Madison stood there, jaw tight, hiding the storm inside. Madison Cole was 32, a respected dentist with nearly a decade of experience. She'd built her practice from scratch, in the heart of a mid-sized American town, earning trust through kindness and skill. But behind her calm professionalism was a woman who'd spent years in the gym, gripping barbells, mastering rock-climbing walls, and training her body to be stronger than most people realized. Her physical strength was something she kept private, a personal passion until now. The 3 men weren't strangers. They'd been patients before, loud, cocky, always late to appointments. Madison had tolerated their juvenile jokes, brushing them off as bad manners. But lately, their behavior had escalated. Today, they crossed a line. It had started when the tallest of them, Ryan, strolled in without an appointment, claiming his tooth was killing him. His 2 friends, Kyle and Trevor, followed close behind. From the moment they entered, their energy was invasive, laughing at her dental assistant, making off-color comments, blocking the hallway as she tried to move from one operatory to another. She'd tried to keep it professional, asking them to take a seat. That was when Kyle reached for her clipboard and said, "You know, Doc, you'd look better without this coat." His eyes raked over her. She felt the hair on her arms stand up. She stepped back, only to bump into Trevor, who smirked and let his hand linger too long on her side. For a moment, Madison's mind flashed back to her early days in dental school, when male classmates had made similar jokes during late-night study sessions. Back then, she'd laughed it off. Back then, she'd been too afraid to push back. But now, years later, she wasn't that woman anymore. Her assistant Jenna saw the exchange from across the room, her eyes wide. Madison caught her gaze and gave the slightest shake of her head, "Don't escalate." But inside, her thoughts were anything but calm. She could feel her heart pounding the same way it did before a heavy deadlift, every muscle ready. Ryan leaned in so close she could smell the cheap cologne on his shirt. "Don't be shy, Doc," he murmured, his tone low and taunting. "We're just having a little fun." That was when Madison smiled, a controlled, deliberate smile. It wasn't one of warmth, but the kind that hid intent. She decided then and there this wouldn't be forgotten. Not by her, and certainly not by them. By the time they finally left, their laughter trailing into the parking lot, Madison's hands were clenched so tightly her knuckles were white. She stood alone in the operatory, the sound of the suction machine still running in the background, and exhaled slowly. She knew exactly what she would do next. This time, there would be no brushing it off. The moment the door shut behind them, Madison's entire body stiffened. She moved to the sink, scrubbing her hands harder than necessary, the scent of antiseptic filling the room. Jenna, her assistant, stepped in quietly. "Madison, are you okay?" Jenna asked, voice low, as if speaking too loudly might shatter the fragile calm. Madison looked up at her in the mirror. "No," she admitted flatly, "but I will be." She'd been in uncomfortable situations before, late-night walks to her car in empty parking lots, inappropriate comments from patients who thought they were being funny moments in dental school when professors ignored complaints. But today felt different. It wasn't just the humiliation. It was the deliberate way they'd cornered her, the smugness in their eyes, the absolute certainty that she wouldn't fight back. She dried her hands and walked straight to the clinic manager's office. Paul, a balding man in his 50s who prided himself on keeping things light, looked up from his computer. They just crossed the line, Madison said without preamble. Ryan, Kyle, and Trevor. They touched me, blocked me, and made sexual comments. This isn't just rude behavior. It's harassment. Paul leaned back in his chair, sighing, as if she'd told him the supply order was late. Madison, I'm sure they didn't mean anything by it. You know how some guys are just joking around. Her jaw tightened. I don't care if they meant it or not. They put their hands on me. Paul shrugged. Look, we're a small-town clinic. These guys are part of the community. We don't want trouble. Maybe just don't schedule them together next time. She stared at him, disbelief hardening into something sharper. So your solution is to rearrange the schedule and hope they behave. Paul held up his hands, palms out. I'm just saying, let's not make a big deal out of this. The words sank in like a stone. No support, no outrage, no acknowledgement that what happened was unacceptable. Madison stood there for a long moment, then gave a short, humorless laugh. Fine, she said finally, her voice calm but edged with steel. I won't make a big deal out of it. She left his office with her decision already made. If Paul wasn't going to protect her, or the integrity of her workplace, she would protect herself. And she'd make sure those men never forgot the mistake they'd made. That night, at her small home, just outside town, Madison sat at her kitchen table with her laptop open, reviewing the appointment schedule. She found what she was looking for, a 3-person booking for the following Thursday. Ryan, Kyle, and Trevor. Cleaning and checkups back to back. Perfect. She leaned back in her chair, the faint hum of her refrigerator filling the quiet. Images from the day replayed in her mind, the smirk on Ryan's face, the way Kyle's eyes had lingered, Trevor's mocking laugh. Each memory tightened her chest. But Madison was not the type to stew in anger without action. Her mind shifted into planning mode. She thought about her grip strength from years of lifting, how she could close a Captains of Crush trainer gripper with ease, how she'd never met a jar she couldn't open. They had no idea what those hands could do. She didn't want to just scare them. She wanted to strip away the cocky assurance they carried like armor. She wanted the moment to be so sudden, so decisive, that it would replay in their minds every time they thought about laying a hand on someone again. Madison closed her laptop, the plan already forming in perfect detail. She'd keep it professional. She'd smile, be courteous, play the same polite dentist they expected. But the moment they stepped over the line again, she'd be ready. And this time, they wouldn't walk away laughing. The days leading up to Thursday moved slowly, each one marked by the anticipation of what Madison knew was coming. On the surface, she kept her routine patients' checkups, a few root canals, but under it all, she was sharpening her resolve like a blade. She adjusted her schedule to make sure Jenna would be present, but positioned so she could step in quickly if things went sideways. Madison also made a point to ensure that the operatory where she'd see them was the smaller one, narrow walls, one chair, and the counter close to the patient's side. It would make any sudden movement from them easier to contain. On Wednesday evening, she visited the gym as usual, but her workout had more focus than ever. Farmer's carries with heavy dumbbells, forearm curls, grip squeezes with thick-handled bars. Each rep was a reminder of the control she had over her own strength. Thursday morning arrived crisp and bright, the smell of fresh coffee filling her kitchen as she ran through her mental checklist. She wore her hair pulled back tighter than usual, her lab coat freshly pressed. No jewelry, no loose accessories, nothing they could grab. By the time 2:00 p.m. rolled around, she was in the small operatory, preparing instruments and checking over charts. She didn't have to wait long. The sound of their laughter announced them before they even stepped into the hallway. Ryan was first, sunglasses perched on his head like he thought he was walking into a bar. Kyle followed, tossing a lollipop stick into the trash without looking. Trevor trailed behind, grinning like the punchline to a joke only they understood. Afternoon, Doc, Ryan said, in a voice that oozed fake charm. "Hope you saved your best smile for me." Madison returned a pleasant but measured smile. "Let's get started. Ryan, you're first." As he settled into the chair, she adjusted the overhead light. She kept her tone calm professional, giving him no reason to suspect the undercurrent of tension in the room. The first few minutes passed without incident, but she could feel them testing the waters, snickering, making small remarks to each other. When she leaned over to check Ryan's lower molars, she felt it. A hand not hers grazed her hip. Light, but deliberate. She froze mid-motion, her gaze still on his mouth, but her mind sharpening into a single, razor-edged thought. "It's time." Madison calmly set down her mirror and scaler, then looked Ryan in the eye. "Open a little wider," she said. As he did, she reached for his wrist. Not fast, not aggressive, but firm enough that he didn't have time to react. Her fingers wrapped around the thickest part of his forearm, and she squeezed. Not a casual squeeze, but a precise crushing clamp that locked his bones in place. Ryan's smirk collapsed. "Ow, hey." Her grip tightened another notch, and his voice cracked into a higher pitch. The color drained from his face. Kyle and Trevor went silent. "You're going to keep your hands to yourself," Madison said, her voice low and steady. "From now on." Ryan tried to pull back, but the movement only made her grip dig deeper. He let out a sharp hiss through clenched teeth. Okay. She released him, without ceremony, and stepped back, adjusting her gloves, as if nothing had happened. "Good. Let's finish your cleaning." Kyle and Trevor exchanged glances, eyes wide, postures tense. The laughter that had filled the hallway minutes earlier was gone, replaced by a silence that clung to the walls. Madison continued working, her hands steady, her voice professional. But beneath that calm exterior, she knew the balance of power in the room had shifted, and they knew it too. The rest of Ryan's cleaning passed in near silence, punctuated only by the hum of the suction tool and the occasional clink of metal against enamel. Ryan sat stiffly in the chair, his free hand gripping the armrest so tightly his knuckles turned pale. When Madison told him to rinse, he obeyed instantly, his eyes fixed anywhere but on hers. "Next," she said, turning toward Kyle without missing a beat. Kyle hesitated. "Maybe Trevor should go first." Madison tilted her head slightly, her expression neutral, but her eyes saying otherwise. "No, Kyle. You're up." Jenna lingered at the doorway, pretending to check the schedule on her tablet, but watching closely. She'd seen the way Ryan's face drained when Madison's hand locked around his wrist, and she knew better than to interrupt now. Kyle sat down, trying to mask his unease with a smirk. "Guess you like to play rough, huh, Doc?" Madison leaned in to adjust the light, her voice cool. "I like to keep things in order." She worked on his upper incisors methodically, scraping away plaque, her movements precise. Kyle tried to joke a few times, but each attempt fell flat. His eyes flickered toward Ryan, who sat rubbing his wrist in small circles. Halfway through, Kyle's foot brushed against Madison's shin under the chair. Whether it was intentional or not, didn't matter. Her patience was done. She set down her scaler and reached under the bib to grasp Kyle's hand. Her fingers closed around his, not at the fingertips, but right at the base near the knuckles, where a firm squeeze could light up every nerve. Kyle's smirk cracked instantly. "Ow, what the?" Her grip intensified, the pressure calibrated like a vice. "You're going to sit still and act like a patient, not a problem. Understood?" "Yeah." Okay, he blurted, wincing. She released him, and he pulled his hand back into his lap, massaging it like it had been caught in a car door. When Trevor's turn came, he didn't even try for humor. He moved to the chair without a word, his eyes locked on the floor. Madison worked on him quickly, her hand steady, her mind cataloging every flicker of discomfort across his face. He avoided her gaze entirely, staring straight at the ceiling until she told him to rinse. As Trevor stepped out of the operatory, Jenna followed them into the hallway. She caught the hushed, tense conversation between the three men. Ryan mumbling something about crazy grip strength. Kyle muttering about not messing with her again. Trevor just shook his head and said, "Man, let's just get out of here." Madison stayed in the operatory for a moment, the faint adrenaline buzz still humming in her veins. She removed her gloves, tossed them into the bin, and allowed herself one small, satisfied breath. When she emerged into the lobby, the trio was already at the front desk, mumbling their goodbyes to the receptionist without making eye contact. Their usual swagger was gone. They walked out in silence, shoulders tense, each one nursing a bruised ego and maybe a sore wrist or hand. Jenna stepped back into the room, her brows raised. That was something. Madison shrugged, picking up the next patient's chart. Sometimes, people need a reminder about boundaries, but she knew it was more than that. This wasn't just a reminder. It was a warning. One they would carry every time they thought about crossing that line again. And from the look in their eyes, they'd gotten the message loud and clear. Word spread faster than Madison expected. By Friday morning, the incident had already become a low murmur in the coffee shop across the street. Someone claimed they'd overheard Ryan complaining to a friend about how the lady dentist nearly broke his wrist. Another swore Jenna had told her cousin, though Jenna would never admit it. In a town this size, privacy was a fragile illusion. Madison wasn't one for gossip, but she could feel the shift the moment she walked into the grocery store that weekend. A few people gave her small nods, subtle but knowing. Others avoided her gaze as if worried they might be next in line for her grip. She didn't mind either reaction. Respect, or at least caution, was a better shield than polite indifference. On Monday, she sat in Paul's office again. His expression was a mix of irritation and discomfort. "I heard about Thursday," he said. "Apparently, you handled it yourself." Madison leaned back in the chair. "I did what you wouldn't." Paul sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "You can't just—" "I can," she cut in her tone, calm but unyielding. "And I will if it means protecting myself and my staff." She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. The certainty in her words carried all the weight. For a moment, he just stared at her, then leaned back and shook his head. "They're not coming back," he muttered. "Guess that's one problem solved." "Exactly," Madison said, standing to leave. The trio didn't just vanish from her patient list, they kept their distance in public too. Ryan, who used to strut through the local gym like he owned it, now looked away whenever she walked in. Kyle avoided the grocery store on weekdays, and Trevor, well, she hadn't seen Trevor at all. But the true satisfaction came a few weeks later, when a local news site ran a short piece about an ongoing police investigation into harassment complaints at multiple businesses. Ryan, Kyle, and Trevor's names were listed. The article didn't detail every incident, but the comments section told the story hers wasn't the first time they'd crossed the line. That night, Madison closed the browser and sat quietly at her kitchen table, letting the knowledge settle in. She'd stopped them in her world, but others had been hurt before. Her stomach tightened at the thought. She couldn't change the past, but maybe she'd helped prevent more damage in the future. The following Thursday afternoon, a new patient, a nervous teenage girl, came in with her mother for a cleaning. As Madison adjusted the chair and prepared her tools, the girl looked at her shyly and said, "My mom says you're the strongest dentist in town." Madison smiled, her eyes softening. "Strong enough to keep my patients safe," she said. The girl's mother met Madison's gaze and gave her a look that was equal parts gratitude and respect. In that moment, Madison realized that what had started as personal retaliation had become something larger, a reminder to herself and others that strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's the steady, unflinching grip that says, "You will not cross this line." And she knew she'd hold that line for as long as it took. Madison's experience was a harsh lesson in the cost of silence. Harassment thrives when met with inaction, and waiting for someone else to step in often means no one will. Her grip that day was more than physical. It was a stand against years of dismissals and brushed off complaints. She learned that defending herself didn't make her difficult. It made her whole. The lesson for others is simple but vital. Know your worth, set your boundaries, and enforce them without apology. When someone tries to diminish you, meet them with the strength, physical or otherwise, that reminds them you cannot be broken.